Last week, we finished up on the Walking by Faith series. And this month, my theme is Character Counts. So today I want to talk about, as the topic within Character Counts, who are you? Years ago, my husband had a business partner who was a devotee of EST. And his favorite saying was, "You are what you think, not what you think you are." And though Dave and I had no knowledge of EST at all, we both thought that his partner, Dennis, was a pretty smart guy. Therefore, we also believed that there must be something to that saying. You are what you think, not what you think you are. Years later, of course, when I discovered religious science, you are what you think became a mantra for me, since it's the very cornerstone of this metaphysical movement. However, I think we can all benefit by asking ourselves another question periodically, and then be willing to listen to the answer. Who am I? Recently, someone called my attention to a little book entitled, "What to Say When You Talk to Yourself." Have any of you seen or read that book? What to Say When You Talk to Yourself. And what I've discovered is that this little book's title has the potential for incredible impact on our lives. Because who I am is directly related to what I say when I talk to myself. Who I am is the result of my thoughts. And my thoughts are what I say when I talk to myself. Whether it's out loud, in a whisper, or through the ideas that bounce around in my head. And if you're like me, there are times when you just haven't got a clue. All that stuff that's percolating around inside of me. Is it divine guidance? Is it my mother's voice? Is that my culture? Is that inherited tendencies? Is it just that really bad burrito I ate earlier today? What is it? So maybe I better listen. Because the dialogue that I have internally affects my moods, my attitudes, my abilities, and affects how I will be involved in the world around me. It sets me up for the self-fulfillment of my happiness. The dialogue that I have internally is what I really think. Even the ones that no one else can hear or that I think don't really matter. So when I don't like what I'm thinking, I need to redirect my self-conversation, don't I? And I need to take back the parts of my life that are out of control. Maybe I can say to myself, when I notice this negative dialogue, that wasn't all that good. Did I really mean that? Or I can even say to myself, stop that. I need to talk to me about what I just thought. I need to take that back, even if I don't feel like it. Incidentally, these conversations are best conducted when you're not in a public place. Not a good idea standing in the checkout line at the grocery store. So when I began listening to my self-talk, or to my self-talk, I discovered an unexpected benefit. There's more than just one personality living within me. In fact, there's all kinds of folk living within me. And I liken them to a board of directors trying to run the show. You know, Napoleon Hill talked about something similar when he talked about the mastermind group. That he would go into a sort of a meditation and have this inner conversation with his mastermind group. He would run ideas by his mastermind group. These were not separate individuals, folks. These were the thoughts and the ideas through the multiplicity of our own personalities. So when we listen to our board of directors or our mastermind group, we discover that there are some different opinions that pop up. And this is actually the fertility of our mind giving us options. Different opinions, different areas of interest, a different need to be heard. There are parts in each of us that don't feel heard. That there are different levels of maturity in my thinking. In some areas, I may be much more mature in my thinking than in others. And sometimes I communicate differently. Not only with people that I'm around, but within me. There is my child that communicates differently than my minister. There is my aging runner and exerciser that communicates differently than the me that loves to kick back in my new lazy boy recliner and watch baseball. And they're all me. I know that. Sometimes I forget that there is this multiplicity within me. Now the question is, which one of those members of my board of directors is running the show? Which is the one inside doing most of the talking? Which is the one that's actually responsible for setting the tone and the direction of my life? And the first indication there is, how balanced is my life? How multifaceted is my life? So you see, when you begin to think in these terms, and many of us do because we come out of a business background or a business setting, we begin to think in these terms, we realize, wow, there's something to be said for this. Now, some people have small boards of directors, and some have very large boards of directors. And there's no judgment here. There's just an observation of people's preferences. I can have such a large board that I can never get a decision. I can do that in corporate America. I can do that in just about any kind of business. Or such a small board that there's very little variety and opportunity for consideration. So let me share with you some of my internal voices. See if any of them are familiar to you. Here's number one. This voice is the creative voice. And it sometimes appears a little bit ditzy, but it's very confident of what it can do through me. Here's the second board of directors voice, the paternal voice. That's a strict one. It's a little bit ashamed of the creative one. It may want to argue with creative ideas. Here's the next one, the bossy one. Always saying, look at me, come and see what I've done. Maybe a bit immature, but who knows? Number 4 is the one who finds fault with everything. And if there isn't anything to find fault with, makes it up. There's so much more to that statement than we realize on the surface when we are looking for things to find fault with. That's the monkey mind, the ego, trying to establish that hierarchy that puts me at the top. Of course, it's my hierarchy. Where else would it put me? And then the next voice is the one that finds joy in everything. It's able to believe anything easily without proof. Frequently, when we come out of a really good meditation, that's exactly where we are, isn't it? And number 6 is the inner voice, the board of directors member, who wonders what it would be like to be president. If only I had the chance. The next voice is the treasurer. Never went to accounting school. Bases all its decisions on how my parents did it. So there's a little magical impulse there, or magical thinking, but a lot of impulse. So you see, these are all different things. In fact, when I thought of that treasurer one, I thought about an experience I had with my mother as she was aging, and where all of her focus was on the money that they spent, and none of her focus was on the money that they received, their income. So there was a lot of concern. And it was a reminder to me to remember in my own life that there are 2 columns in my ledger. One is income and the other is expense. So again, the balancing that when we pay attention to these inner voices that sometimes come out of our past and have not yet had an opportunity to blossom into maturity, that's exactly what they are, and that we can deal with that. And eventually, we come to the realization that somebody does occupy the position of president of this board of directors of my inner self. And that's the I. That's the I of me. That's the I of you. That's the center. I went to the Science of Mind materials for a definition of the word selfness. S-E-L-F-N-E-S-S. And I couldn't find it. So then I went to the source of all knowledge, which of course is Google. And I Googled the word selfness. And it kept wanting to give me selfless or selfish. And I was a little bit insistent. Selfness. And I finally got it. And I got it from Wikipedia. Thank you very much. And the definition of selfness is the essential self. The individuality of self. I said, whoa, that's so good. That's what I wanted to hear. Because that word, and you've heard me use that word before, selfness, just really resonates with me. Not as a selfish thing or a distracted thing, but the core of our being, the essential self, the individuality that each of us is. Or, in the corporate world, the president of my inner board of directors. That is guided by intuition and divine guidance. That is active in review of possibilities, because the universe is always giving us possibilities. The fact that they come through an inner board of directors is nothing less than that. It's the opportunity to make choices, to go into treatment, meditation, or affirmation, to find the path that brings the greatest joy and satisfaction. Metaphorically speaking, I can step in anytime as the president then and influence the rest of my board of directors. Go with the intuitive message that says this is the person to hire, that says this is the house to buy, that says this is the direction I want to study. We always know intuitively. We don't always know at the conscious level. So by paying attention, now you have another way of determining who's talking when you're in the process of, first of all, doing spiritual mind treatment, meditation, and the other practices that you have, and then observing and responding to the ideas that come. Because some of them are going to come through these filtered areas that I talked about. Others are going to be so clear to you. In the instance of the caregiver you talked about, some of them didn't show up for their appointment. Some of them were not really connected with the intention. But there was one that was obviously the right and perfect choice. And that's always the way it is when we are open and alert to the possibilities. Because we, as the president of our own inner board, are in charge. So it's very important for all of us to keep in mind that not all of the members of our inner board are equally developed, emotionally speaking. And as the president, I have to take that into stride because I never want to demean any part of myself since all of it is created in God's goodness. But these various ideas or layers of consciousness developed at different times in my life. Some of them as I was a very small child, others as I was a very influenced teen, still others as a young wife and parent and later in business, that there were various external influences available during those times. It's just like often we talk about, we may in our spiritual practice and expression be very mature in the area of prosperity. And in the area of personal relationships, we're operating at a different level. The good news about that is, Raymond Charles Barker once said, is that when we're operating at a lower level of consciousness in one area of our lives, we can always lift it to the area of the higher level at which we're operating in another area of our lives. So, recognizing that we are a work in progress and not all of it is moving at the same time. They're building a house across the street from me now, and it's so interesting to watch that literally from the ground up. When you live on lava, from the ground up has a whole different meaning, doesn't it? Because the preparation that goes into building a house is very different on a lava outflow. And what I see is that they get along quite far ahead in some areas, and they're still way what would appear to be behind in others. And it's not because workers aren't showing up, it's because some of it's harder to do than others. Some of it's more complicated, more involved than others. So that's always the possibility in the development of my own selfness, that there are some areas that take longer than others to develop. It's not a bad thing. It just is. And so maybe I want to put a little more love and compassion and attention in that area in order to encourage its growth. And sometimes I'll notice that when there are certain thoughts in my mind that seem to voice nervousness or agitation, fear, and that my ignoring them causes that to be more active in my thought process. The more I don't listen to it, the more it demands my attention. And interestingly, looking at this from the standpoint of developing my compassion for those parts of myself that are demonstrating nervousness, fear, agitation, actually causes my compassion, when I use it, to grow my confidence. It's not like I'm patronizing those areas, those negative areas that are demanding attention, but I'm understanding them better. And I'm looking at ways to change that. So I can create a sense of safety when I listen to the fear in me or the nervousness in me. Because when I listen to it, it settles down. And then I can go into treatment or I can go into meditation. And I can be guided to find ways to dissipate it. Because if I don't listen, well, you know what happens when you don't listen to what yourself is trying to tell you. So the first step in my self-assessment here is to ask myself, who's running my show? Is that voice in me the direction I really want to go? And then, what kind of a president am I? Do I just let the meeting of my mind run into chaos because I can't cope with all those voices? Of course, the better you get at this, the less voices and the less noise and the less frequently this occurs. So, do I let decisions that influence my life happen haphazardly? Or do I work with those obvious concerns from within me and find a way to work through it? Sometimes I just need to take a time out. One of the ways we take a time out is to get sick. Did you know that? When we get sick, we have to take time out because the body needs time to catch up, to heal, to rest, to reflect, to replenish. So sometimes when I'm not paying attention, I don't take full advantage of that. I don't allow myself to recoup, if you will. You know, if you don't put gasoline in your car, what happens? You find yourself sitting on the side of the road, unable to go anywhere or do anything. This is the same way. We really need to refuel ourselves. So when we are refueling ourselves, in this instance, it's mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, not just physically. And that's what the physical body sometimes needs to tell us, is, whoa, wait a minute, let's get the board of directors back in session here. Let's get everybody back in the same room. Let's get on the same schedule. Let's get on the same plane of thinking. And to use that as in that way. So, more often than not, my inner board meetings provide me with an opportunity for a field of thought and divinity to emerge. And that's really what this talk is all about, is finding a way to be able to sit down and be in sync or in parallel internally to find those ways which are already in existence, to find those ways for me to proceed, to grow, to expand. Reminds me in a passage in Psalm 1 of the Old Testament in the Bible. And you know, I don't quote the Bible very often, but ever so often a Bible verse pops into my head. And more often than not, what I find when that happens is that there is a metaphysical interpretation of that Bible verse that I need to share with you. So here's the verse. Blessed is the one who talks not in the counsel. Let me start again. Blessed is the one who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor sits in the seat of the scornful. Ungodly in this instance translates to unloving, and scornful translates to harsh and resentful. So the passage restated sounds like this. Blessed is the one who walks not in the counsel of the unloving, nor sits in the seat of resentment. Well, how many times might that be an accurate description of the tone of my inner board meetings? Ungodly and scornful. And this is born out of the simple belief that my thinking doesn't matter. And anyway, nobody else knows what's going on in me, right? But my burgeoning belief in religious science over the years has taught me that every single thought does matter. That every single thought is causing something. That every single thought is becoming something. It's teaching me an awareness of the world inside me, including divine wisdom, and I must grant divine wisdom a place at my board table. Ooh, how about that? When I convene my inner board of directors, a place at the table for divine wisdom. And eventually, every voice in that finds its peace by being identified and honored. And when I allow this, a sense of silence begins to emerge that's none of those voices. That's when integration of being, selfness, occurs. The poet Rumi said, "Beyond all ideas of right and wrong, there is a field. I'll meet you there." I believe that field he speaks of is divine wisdom. Because there is a space in us that has nothing to do with any of those voices that I talked about in our inner board of directors that is always vying for attention. There's a space within us where silence emerges. This field is where all the voices of our inner ego drop away and our preferences subside. So know with me today that there is a place within you that has nothing to do with those inner voices that occupy so much of your worldly time. And this place of communion, connection, of spiritual oneness and divine wisdom is so beautiful. And its purpose is to merge with you, to dance and to sing with you, to express as you. That is who you truly are. And so it is.